Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Be a Better You podcast. I am your host and subconscious reprogramming expert, Allison K. Dagny. And today we're going to talk about the hidden ways that you abandon yourself. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because last week's episode was all about healing those childhood abandonment and rejection wounds. And often what happens is we carry those into our relationships as adults. So there may be these hidden things that you might not realize that you're doing, either subconsciously or as a self-protection mechanism. And I want to draw that to your attention to help you be the best version of you that you can. So if you've ever felt like that you're stuck in these patterns, right, where you are struggling to find connection with others, where your relationships always feel very tumultuous, I want you to know that it's not that there's something wrong with you. It's not that you're broken. It's not that you have this like unresolvable trauma or wounding. That's not the case at all. You could probably just be caught in this trap of self-rejection and self-abandonment and not even realize that you're doing it. And I want to help you with this because I have seen many clients who have experienced this, and I have experienced it myself. So if you want to be that best version of yourself, right? If you want to get out of this constant stagnation of feeling like you are trying so hard and nothing is ever changing, that you are in your relationships and having arguments or issues with people and you can't figure out why this might be. Well, we can trace this back to ways that you might be abandoning yourself and ways that you might be rejecting yourself without even knowing it, which could be causing some of these issues, okay? So let's first talk about what self-rejection and self-abandonment is. Well, when you reject yourself, it's no different how you're treating yourself than how someone else would be treating you if they were rejecting you, okay? So I want you to think of it like if someone was pushing you away, right? Well, you might be pushing yourself away. And you might be like, how do I push myself away? Well, if you feel like that you're too much or you feel like that you're not enough, you could be rejecting yourself by trying to be someone you're not, by hiding your authenticity, by lying or concealing truths, right? Because you're afraid, because there's fear that you'll be judged. So you may reject yourself unknowingly. Now, this all comes from deep within the subconscious mind, and there are things inside of your nervous system that are there for your benefit to help you feel safe and protected. So if something comes up for you, it's likely because of those old wounds that have never been resolved. So if you haven't listened to that other episode, I encourage you to go back last week and listen to that one as well. Now, self-abandonment is often when we find ourselves disconnecting from our needs, our wants, or even like the truth to keep other people happy or to avoid pain and conflict or discomfort. So you might do things that look more like people pleasing or doing things you don't really want to do, and you're abandoning your own needs and wants and desires and things like that because you feel like you have to put others before you. Now, let's talk about how this happens. When you are so focused on what's wrong with you, okay, what you end up doing is you start believing that your entire presence is a problem, okay? That something is wrong with me, or people aren't going to like me, or people are going to reject me, right? And so when it comes to self-rejection and self-abandonment, the focus is on the self. The focus is on you. It's a me thing. It's my problem, right? So we end up rejecting ourself because the focus is so much on the self. We abandon the self because the focus is so much on the self, right? What other people are thinking about us, how we should be reacting, what we should be saying, how we should have done things differently, okay? This might look like apologizing for things that aren't your fault, right? Like immediately jumping up and apologizing. I'm so sorry, like, and trying to like either keep the peace or squash any sort of like potential arguments or conflicts or disagreements, right? So you immediately apologize for things that maybe even aren't your fault, right? And that is a form of self-abandonment because you are taking on something that really doesn't belong to you. Now, if you're apologizing for something that is your fault, then obviously then that's a good and healthy response. But if it isn't, right, your fault and you are apologizing for things like that, that's a form of self-abandonment. If you're in the company of other people and someone makes a comment or says something that's hurtful and you laugh it off, but you truly are hurt, and instead of confronting the person or exiting the conversation or holding a boundary or standing up for yourself, maybe you just laugh it off, ignore it, say, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, or I just need to not be so sensitive or whatever, right? That can be a form of self-abandonment. And the reason why is because if you were not that person, right, that was being made fun of, or somebody was making a joke at your expense, and you witnessed that, and let's say the person who it was directed at was somebody you really loved and cared about, you might stand up for that person. You might say, hey, that was not nice, or what, like, why would you say something like that? That's really rude, right? Because you would be fully accepting of and fully embracing of the person that you care about who is at the target of that comment or attack, right? But if you're not doing it for yourself, again, you're either rejecting or abandoning you. Just like if you didn't speak up for that other person, they might feel like, hey, why didn't you stand up for me? But it's the same for yourself, right? Why didn't I stand up for myself? Why didn't I set a boundary for myself? Okay. This could be things like acting like things don't matter to you so that you're not disappointed. For instance, like, let's say that you don't make a big deal of your birthday because you don't want to be disappointed. So you kind of say, it's not a big deal and I don't need anybody to do anything for my birthday. But really inside, you love celebrating and you love people giving you gifts and hanging out with you and spending time with you and having cake or celebrations, right? But maybe because you're afraid that you're going to be seen as needy or going to be seen as too much, or you're going to be disappointed because others won't show up for you, that you just internalize it, and then you maybe outwardly express like apathy, like, I don't care, it's not a big deal, we don't have to do anything, right? That sort of thing. Okay, that could be a form of self-abandonment. Another thing is staying quiet, staying silent, just so that you're not labeled dramatic, or so that you're not rocking the boat, or that you aren't creating conflict in the group or whatever, right? So you shut down your voice, you keep quiet, you don't say what's really on your mind. And the problem with these kinds of things is that, one, you're not really being true to yourself. You're not being honest. And the reason why is because of fear, right? Like, we're afraid to be rejected and abandoned. But the interesting thing about this is you're already abandoning and rejecting yourself, right? So we operate out of fear because we don't want others to reject and abandon us, yet we're doing it to ourselves. Okay, is this making sense? All right. Now, let's talk about how emotional abuse starts this programming, right? And you can go back and listen to that other episode. I talk a little bit about this, but if you grew up in a household where there was emotional abuse, or maybe you lived through it in your relationships, ultimately what happened is you were trained to disconnect from yourself. Okay, so there's a link to your nervous system here. So what happens is that your body is learning to scan for danger all the time, right? Especially in those formative years when we're little. And what you did was you learned to read the room, to read people's facial expressions, what they say, what they're acting like, their energies, right? You're learning to pick up on all of these things instead of actually listening to yourself. So you're looking outside for danger or clues of unrest or the possibility that somebody might erupt or get angry or something like that, right? You're looking at the external situations, which is very, very normal. We all do it. Instead of actually going inside and listening to yourself. But the problem is no one ever taught you to do that, right? No one ever gave you these instructions and said, you should trust yourself and you should listen to yourself. And what do you think about this, right? Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you weren't taught those things. And these are trauma responses. These are trauma adaptations, right? But the reason that these things are happening to you in the current day is because of these old patterns from our childhoods, okay? Because at some point in your life, you were made to believe that you had to be different in order to be accepted and in order to not be rejected, in order to not be abandoned, right? In order to be welcomed, you had to be something else. And that's very, very common. So often for people is when things start getting better, like let's say you're in a relationship and things start looking good in that relationship, you might sabotage that. You might sabotage your own happiness, not because you're weak or because you want to or because you're trying to like destroy a good thing, but it's because your nervous system is still operating on that past program because it still thinks that it's got to protect you. And when you're experiencing something either healthy or happy or something like that, it doesn't understand. It wants to go back to what's familiar and what it knows because this is new. And even though you're happy or even though you feel good about whatever's happening kind of like logically, you know this is like a healthy relationship or it's good or something like that, or these are nice people or friends, you know, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship even. You might look for opportunities to sabotage whatever that is because it's unfamiliar. Okay, so let's say that you're looking for friends and you've always struggled with making friends. And maybe you're always trying to be someone who you're not. And you have decided, you know what, I'm going to try to be my true authentic self. And you've been practicing this and all of a sudden you're in a group with these new people and you like want to explore these friendships, and something inside of you after like the third or fourth time of like hanging out with these people starts to reject these people for no real apparent reason. You might just feel like, I don't know, I don't like these people, or I don't want to be around these people, right? And you might not even be able to put your finger on it. But chances are, if you really inspect it, you might notice that your nervous system is becoming dysregulated because this is actually not familiar territory for you. You're used to people rejecting you. You're used to people abandoning you. And when that doesn't happen and people actually start welcoming you and embracing you, it feels scary because guess what happens after that? Vulnerability, being your true self, being more authentic, expressing your emotions and feelings, right, with people who are going to embrace you. But for a lot of people, that's super scary because they're not used to it. They're used to the opposite. Maybe, you know, having a parent who was not attentive to your needs, who sent you to your room every time you were bad or did something wrong, right? Never address the problem, just like go to your room, like I don't want to see you, don't bother me, you know, come out when you can think about what you've done, right? And then you come out and you go play and nothing ever gets resolved. You weren't taught anything, right? Well, you were abandoned in that situation. Your emotions were rejected. Your emotions and feelings were abandoned. So you learn very early on that that's normal. So when someone is actually coming to you and saying, hey, I want to talk about this, or I have a problem with what you said, or let's communicate, maybe your alarm bells are going off like, whoa, this is not normal. I am not used to this. When something bad happens or people are upset or there's any sort of like disagreement or conflict, I need to run away and hide, right? And that's because you learned early that your emotional needs were not worth discussing, didn't matter to have a conversation about, right? And so you took that with you throughout your life into every relationship that you ever have. So anytime other people start to feel like what would be normally considered healthy or normal, to you, that's completely off. Like that's not safe for my nervous system. Okay, so you may end up sabotaging your own happiness, relationships, and friendships, again, because your nervous system is still stuck in that old state. But the good news is you can pull yourself out of that and you don't have to stay stuck there. Okay, so if you are someone who says you're fine when you're not fine, right? When people confront you and say, how are you? Are you okay? And you say, yeah, I'm fine, right? And you're really not, just because you want to avoid the conversation or the topic. Because it's scary to do that, because typically from your experience, the abandonment and rejection was isolation. Like, I need to hole up and go inside myself and figure out what's wrong with me, right? All these things, right? So you might just say, oh no, I'm fine. And you just kind of avoid the topic. If you're somebody who doesn't speak up in work situations or in any situations, like friendships or with your neighbors or with your family members or your friends or your partner, right? You just hold your tongue. If you avoid conflict, I'm raising my hand over here because I am a person who has not only been trained to like self-abandon from childhood and self-rejection from childhood, but also I was actually made to believe conflict was not good. Like, conflict was bad. Like, if my parents were arguing about something, my dad would run to the garage and start working on his cars and like his tools and stuff, and would be there for hours. So he was the one that was more of the, avoiding the conflict. At least that's how I perceived it as a child. Like, maybe he was doing something different that I didn't see. Maybe he was approaching my mom to have conversations, and I don't recall seeing that. I just remember mom getting upset and dad going off, right? And like I said, like, I was that kid who, if I got in trouble, it was go to your room. So nobody really dealt with me, and I was just left alone in my room to figure things out. And like, really, I would just end up playing with my toys and wait for the clock to tick to when I could come out and then go play again. So there was never really any solution. It was always like sweeping things under the rug. So that abandonment and rejection started that program for me. And so as an adult, that's what I learned to do, right? I took that from my childhood, and I learned to do that in my relationships, to avoid conflict. Don't get into arguments. Don't, upset people. Don't rock the boat, like all of that stuff. And those things that I just rattled off, those are also subconscious beliefs. Those are just things that you were programmed to believe, or at least I was, but maybe you can relate. If you are also shrinking yourself or your needs, you are pretending to be something that you're not, you're telling people that everything's fine and you're okay and you don't need anything when you really, really do, just to keep the peace, right? These are examples of how, emotional abuse keeps this pattern going, right? It's just this constant way of us shutting down, avoiding conflict, abandoning ourselves, rejecting our needs, right? And like I said before, if you're doing it to yourself, that's extremely common and normal, but it needs to change, because what we really want is to be loved, to be valued, to be appreciated, to be seen and heard, right? Truly, everybody probably feels something along those lines. But we can't get there if we are rejecting and abandoning ourselves first. We say, I just want people to accept me for who I am. I just want people to love me. And that's wonderful. And we should want those things. That is a great thing to achieve in a relationship. And that means a relationship is healthy when someone does love you and accept you and care for you. But are you loving and accepting and caring for yourself? Often what we see in other people, like what we want them to do for us, is often things that we aren't doing for ourselves. If you really, really inspect that. And that's so important. The thing is, I want you to understand is that If you stay here in this place of abandoning yourself or rejecting yourself, if you're staying here, you're likely feeling chronic anxiety. You're probably very lonely in your relationships. You might often feel like you can't get close with people. People don't understand you. You might fear actually speaking the truth or expressing your needs. You might even get resentment start building against other people. Like you're resenting your partner or your friends or whatever, that starts building because you're holding all this in, pretending to be something that you're not, just to avoid the conflict or to keep the peace, right? So again, abandoning your needs, rejecting your needs. You might feel like you're invisible. You might actually feel like you're being fake. Because I know that when I am being totally myself and feel totally at ease with whoever I'm with, it feels so good. It feels really, really good, especially when it's a safe person who is going to laugh with you, who's not going to judge you. Like, think about your best friend or somebody who you can be really silly with or just say the weird things, right? But if you're putting on a show for other people, you might feel like a fraud, or you might feel invisible. You might feel like I can't put myself out there. I can't really be myself. So you're just like kind of a fly on the wall. So one thing I want to mention here is that the more you do this, the more you reject yourself or abandon your needs, the more your mind obsesses over fixing yourself. Okay, so it's like this trap because nothing's actually wrong with who you are. You're disconnected from your true self, the most, authentic version of who you are and who you're meant to be. So if you feel that urge inside of you to speak up and you don't, to stand up for yourself and you don't, to say the thing and you don't, right? Then what happens is you're rejecting yourself, you're abandoning yourself. If you don't express the need, if you say that you're fine when you're not, right? Then your mind starts going into, I need to fix myself. There's something wrong with me. Why can't I do this and that? Why am I not able to, make friends? Why can't I hold on to relationships, right? You start obsessing over this. Like, I need to fix myself or I'm broken, right? And that's not true, right? What is true is that you are taking all these things and you're like storing them in the back of your mind, stating like, oh, there's something wrong with me, when truly all it is a bunch of programs that's creating feelings of fear that's causing you to behave how you behave. That's it. It really is that simple. Beliefs create emotions, create behaviors. Beliefs, emotions, behaviors, in that order. Okay? So when people wonder like, oh, why does she act like that? Or why does he behave this way? Or, because they have an emotion that came before that, and then they have a belief that came before that. It's all about the program. It's all about the belief systems and structures that have been imprinted on people since the day they were born. People don't just behave for no reason. They do it because, one, they have subconscious beliefs that are driving that. Two, they may have nervous system responses or coping strategies that have built in their bodies for survival. And you are the same. We're all built like that. Okay? So coping with this has kept you safe, probably for a very long time, right? And what I mean by coping is if you are, let's say, at a party, a big family gathering, and you are putting everyone else before you for whatever reason in your mind, your nervous system, your belief system, all these things, right? So you are people pleasing, you are, people say, oh, let's go do this. And you're like, okay, even though you don't want to, right? If you are in a bad mood and they ask you how you are and you say you're fine, right? Whatever that is just your way of feeling safe. That is a coping strategy. That is something that you've done repetitively over and over and over again just to try to keep you feeling safe. But coping doesn't actually change you. It's a Band-Aid. Healing is what actually heals. right? Healing is what sets you free. Okay? So if at that party you actually decided to do something different, and instead of just going along, getting along, instead of, masking the truth, you say or do something that is actually in your best interest without worrying about anyone else. So let's say that everyone is encouraging you to, I don't know, drink alcohol at this party, and you had recently decided you thought you want to cut back alcohol and you don't want to be drinking. Well, if you want to feel safe, your behavior is going to reflect that, because you're afraid something's bad is going to happen. You're going to be rejected, ridiculed, abandoned, or whatever, right? If you don't agree. But let's just imagine that you said, you know what? I'm not doing that because I've already committed to myself, and, I don't want to do that. Like, no, I don't want to drink at this party. I've just made that decision and I don't want to do that. Well, what you just did was you self-accepted. You embraced the truth. You came back to yourself and honored your commitment. You stood up for yourself. You didn't cave under the pressure of what other people wanted you to do. Maybe they felt more comfortable if you did it, because then they wouldn't feel so uncomfortable if they were the only ones drinking, or who knows? I don't know why, right? Maybe they think you're more fun when you've had a couple of drinks, but it doesn't matter to you, because you're accepting yourself for who you are, and you're saying, no, I'm not going to do that. Right? I'm using this as an example. You could come up with any example. It's just anything that maybe people are putting pressure on you, or you're not abandoning yourself. You're saying, wait a second, I'm going to be true to me, right? That is the practice. That is the thing that you've got to start taking baby steps to do, to prove to yourself that, wait a minute, I am worthy of my voice, my opinions, standing up for myself, saying how I feel, honoring my commitments, right? I am worth that. Because the more that you do that, the more that your brain starts to go, oh yeah, this is important to accept ourselves. This is important to love ourselves, to commit to ourselves, to embrace the trueness of who we are, right? Your brain starts to take note. Because in the past, if you had self-abandoned and you had self-rejected, then your brain starts going, well, there must be something wrong with me, because I'm changing myself to fit my environment or to make other people happy. So we have to move beyond these coping strategies, which is all they are. So I really want you to just pay attention to the strategies that you use, because everybody's are going to be a little bit different. But what are you doing to cope with your discomfort? What are you doing to cope in times of fear, or times of anxiety, or times of worry about your own abandonment and rejection, right? Because remember, self-abandonment and self-rejection comes from the fear of being abandoned and rejected by others. Okay? You're not self-abandoning and self-rejecting because you want to do that to yourself. You're doing it to please others so that they don't abandon and reject you. Okay? So I help women move beyond these kinds of coping strategies to get out of these old toxic patterns that are keeping us stuck, that cause us to self-sabotage, that cause us to sabotage relationships, things like that, right? We want to be the best version of ourselves that we can. So we go into your subconscious mind, we rewire those old beliefs and patterns, and help your nervous system feel safe to be you again, to accept yourself and be okay in any situation, because that's the way it really should be, right? So that way you can stop living in this like shadow of yourself and start being natural, start being real. Stop self-abandoning, stop rejecting your needs, your wants, your desires, your whatever, right? That is so important, because you wouldn't reject someone you loved. So why are we doing that to ourselves? So here's a couple actionable tips. So if you have a pen and paper, you could grab this and write this down or stick it in your phone, right? I want you to notice your apologies. Ask yourself, am I truly sorry or am I just afraid of disapproval? Okay, because if you're one of those people who just immediately apologize right away, right? If I apologize right away, I'm going to smooth things over, get this person to like calm down. I don't have to deal with it, right? But I'm not being true to myself. So are you truly sorry? Is it really your fault? Or are you just afraid of the other person's reaction, disapproval, whatever? Number 2, check the way that you act socially, okay? Meaning, well, ask yourself this question. What am I pretending not to care about or to care about when I really don't, right? Are you putting on a mask? Are you acting a certain type of way just to please the crowd or please others? Oh, acting interested in something you really don't care about instead of saying, yeah, I don't really know a whole lot about that, right? Are you trying to impress people? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about when you like check yourself in your social interactions and then track your triggers. So where do you find that you silence yourself instead of speaking the truth? So these 3 things: notice those apologies, check how you act in social interactions, and track your triggers. Because if you can figure this out, you might start seeing a pattern, and then it's a lot easier to shift out of it. And I'm not saying you're going to do it overnight, but you can do it. So you might be like, wow, I didn't notice. Like, I'm always the one in social interactions where I'm agreeing to do this party or that thing or do this, and I really don't have any interest in doing those things. But I'm afraid if I say no, then they'll never ask me back. Or if I'm afraid if I say no, they won't like me. Right? That's what I mean by that. So if you're listening to this thinking, ugh, this is me, I find myself in some of these things, you're not alone. Believe me, I got my hand up. I have been there. I've experienced these things, and some of these things I'm still working on. But I've helped so many clients unravel these hidden patterns because all we have to do is figure out what's in your subconscious, bring it to the surface, and use rapid reprogramming, that 4-step process that I use to help my clients rewire their minds. And I use it for myself. I still use it. It's an amazing tool. So you deserve more than coping and survival mode and a dysregulated nervous system. You deserve to feel safe in your body and safe in your mind. You deserve to feel freedom and be able to just be natural and be true to yourself instead of having that focus on, oh, what did I do? Or did I say something I shouldn't have? Or maybe I should do this differently, or maybe I should have acted this different way, right? Because what you're doing there, even when you question those things, is you are abandoning and rejecting yourself. Okay? I hope you see that, right? Imagine a child, like your child or a niece or a nephew or a child that you love, saying those things to you. Oh, I wish I had done this differently. Maybe little Susie would like me better. Oh, I wish I had done that differently. Maybe they would still be my friend now. You wouldn't say, yep, you should have acted differently. You should have been a different person. You shouldn't have been your true self. You would never say that to that child. And this is part of reparenting ourselves, right? We've got to look at ourselves from that angle too, right? Well, you know what? If I make a mistake, that's one thing, right? If I make a mistake and I hurt somebody and I need to apologize, that's different than if I'm just being me. And then I'm questioning if I should be me, right? You wouldn't tell a child that, oh, you should be someone different so other people like you. You'd say, be you, and the right people will come to you, right? Don't abandon yourself. Don't reject yourself. Really think about it. Where am I doing this? When am I doing this? Who am I doing it with? Who do I feel the most uncomfortable around being my true self? And who do I feel most comfortable being my true self? And why is that, right? We have to really start inspecting these things. And in that inspection, we can find a lot of subconscious beliefs. And those are the things, again, that drive our emotions, which then impact our behaviors. So if you're ready to go deeper on this, to stop abandoning yourself, to stop rejecting yourself, and start really living a life of freedom where you're true to who you are and you're like, I am just me. And if you don't like it, then, bye. That's okay. I'm not for everyone. Everyone's not for me. And that's totally okay. Okay? So you can schedule a call with me, a free 30-minute chat. We can start untangling this and I can learn about kind of where you're at on your healing journey and guide you and give you some of my expertise and tell you what I think would be the most helpful. I'm happy to do that. And then I can tell you about all the programs and products that I have that could support your healing. But remember, right, living in this fear or this silence or doubting yourself and questioning if you should even be who you are, right? That is not the best way for you to heal. That's, again, it's just this kind of coping thing that you've adapted as a response to your trauma. It's just who you learn to be based on your experiences. But that doesn't mean that's how you have to be forever. You can change that. You can unlearn it. You can rewire all those patterns. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Just as like a quick recap, self-rejection and self-abandonment are things that we often don't even realize that we're doing. And it's not because you're broken. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because of your trauma. It's because of how other people have made you think and believe about the world and about yourself. And it's a way for us to feel safe. But again, all that stuff can be changed. So, if you need to go back and listen to this again, if you're sabotaging relationships, if you are scanning for danger everywhere, you're, doing things to put other people before you instead of yourself, I'd really encourage you to, really get into the questions that I asked earlier about, like, are you apologizing? Are you putting on a mask in social settings? Are you silencing yourself instead of speaking up? That sort of thing. That's all going to be really important introspective work. If you do nothing else, I hope that you do that. Okay? Thank you for listening. If this episode spoke to you, go down to the bottom of the show notes here, click the link, and schedule your free 30-minute consultation, and let's connect. And I will talk to you all next week.